The video game industry has been using a very improper score system to review games for a very, very long time.
I give that statement a 7.2 out of 10.
Of course you would.
Hot take.
7.2? What does that even mean?
I don't know.
And that's exactly the problem. See, folks, the scoring system that we have on a predominantly large amount of video game journalists and reviewers doesn't make sense anymore, okay? Look, there was a point in time way back in the 90s when video game reviews were very prominent in magazines where they used a very basic scoring system to kind of give like younger gamers an idea of what this game was without having to read the entire article.
Maybe you remember magazines like Game Pro who would have little icons, like a wild and crazy happy face for a 5.0 and then a sad face for like a 0.5 or a 1. Things were a little more, I don't know, that's like the medieval period of gaming in my mind.
Let's call it medieval. Right? I like that. I like that. Because it was
medieval was released around that time for the PlayStation 1 as well.
Sure, that works. It's look. Here's a problem that we're having now. We've been talking a lot about Fallout 76, and it's not something I really want to keep dragging.
It's a topic that needs to be talked about because no one's talking about it.
Yeah, apparently. Here's a problem that we had recently. We saw a couple of reviews come out. We're not going to mention anyone specifically, but one review from a very large entity that is one of the leading industry folks in video game reviews gave Fallout 76 a 5 out of 10. And I'm going to be honest, guys, I lost it. I started getting really angry. I started stomping around. I started screaming at the wall.
I can vouch for this. Shane is generally a pretty angry man, but today he was especially furious.
We just covered Fallout 76 for like an hour explaining why it doesn't work, and these folks gave it what basically is a score that they themselves scored as mediocre. Mediocre would mean that the game works, and it's just not that interesting. Fallout 76 doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The reviewer said they played it for about 50 hours. I don't want anyone going after this one reviewer or anything like that. They work for an entity. There's rules they have to go through. This is a problem with a lot of different reviewers, though, where they're using the score system and it's hurting the way they review things. Their actual review of the game is quite detailed, and it fills in a lot of things, and it covers a lot of aspects of the game, and it's a very good review. And what they said at the end of it made a lot of sense, okay? And all the other reviews I've seen that even give it a passing grade in the number system are actually saying things that are very constructive about the game. I've personally not witnessed one bad review of the game. It's always been incredibly detailed, it's always been incredibly thoughtful, and very descriptive. But that number system never makes sense.
So you're saying that despite the sort of the criticisms that they're giving and the positivity that they're showering the game still doesn't meet a 5.0.
100%.
It shouldn't.
100%.
Yeah.
The game is inherently flawed, and there are problems with the game that make it unenjoyable and in many cases unplayable. We had the game crash and lock up on us so many times.
That's true.
We couldn't get on servers. And we've played it for a lot of time. Maybe not 100 hours, but we've played it for a lot of hours. And this is the thing, a number system can define something that isn't real. When you see a 5 out of 10, you might be thinking, okay, it's not the best game in the world, but at least it's a game that I can enjoy somewhat.
In my mind,
find something out of it.
Yeah, it's a pass, right? A 5 out of 10 is a very, very low pass, but it's still something where you can complete it in some measurement without there being like overabundance of problems. Right?
When I see a 5 out of 10 for movies, typically, or maybe 3.5 stars, or whatever it is, right? Or no, 2.5 stars. When I see a 2.5 star movie, sometimes I think, oh, it's just going to be a popcorn flick, something I can sit down, watch for 2 hours and enjoy, right? That's not what happens with video games, though. When a video game is broken, you can't see the end of that story. You can't see the end of that gameplay. And that's something that I'm noticing a lot more with a lot of reviews lately, because I don't think people are utilizing the score systems in a proper way. Now, here's just a couple of problems I've had that I think kind of tell you why this doesn't work. When I think about the score system being used nowadays, I think about the score system kind of defining what the game is by having good graphics, having good sound, having good gameplay. Gameplay is paramount. It is the most important thing in a video game, but a score system typically doesn't really tell you about that. When you see a score, it could be like, oh, the game is beautiful, but the gameplay doesn't work. Or the game sounds amazing, but the gameplay is kind of boring.
Yeah, we have to take into consideration, like, there are some outlets that give a certain percentage to certain aspects of the game. So you said gameplay, sound, graphics, but there is no standardized, like, these are arbitrary ratings, right?
Yes.
There is no standardized rating. So what would be a 5 in one instance could be a 3 in another instance, because maybe they don't weigh sound as heavily, as graphics as heavily, as gameplay. It's very confusing.
Absolutely. Here's a great example of something that is very difficult for reviewers to kind of look at. Right now, if you are watching this, you can head over to Metacritic, or listening to this. You can go to Metacritic, and you can see that Pokemon Let's Go is being review bombed by pretty much every user on the site.
Yeah, I really wanted to talk about that.
Yeah. Now, this is a part of this review thing as well, because review bombing is something we're starting to see a lot in the industry, because consumers generally get upset about some aspect of the game, some kind of update in a game, or something that has totally changed what the game is, or in some cases it just doesn't live up to their experiences, and the critical score sometimes doesn't reflect that.
Yeah, so from both sides, it cannot reflect, possibly not reflect what the product actually is. You spoke about review bombing, and sure, there is some, like, we looked at the Pokemon Let's Go reviews, okay, and there are some great reviews there, even in the negatives, that express themselves. Okay, this is what I wanted, this is what I didn't want, this is what I loved about the game. But okay, I have the numbers right here. 146 people, 146 of the reviews, the negative reviews, were a 0.
Yeah.
A 0 on a game, to me, is almost impossible to get. It has to be like a black hole.
Oh,
it has to not exist.
It has to be like terrible. You have to put the game on, and it actively punches you in the face. Like, somehow.
That would still be a 1 shade.
It would still, because it actually managed to do something.
It did something.
It did something.
So no, but I mean, I think we're looking at something like 500 or 600 reviews overall, positive, mixed, and negative.
Yeah.
And 146 of those are 0. Like, there's no way. And this is the type of thing that can highly affect a person's choice of whether or not they're going to buy it.
We have both not played Pokemon Let's Go. However,
a bit.
Well, a
little bit.
So we haven't played the final version, but we have played builds of it at Nintendo events.
Yes.
Just to be completely open about that, Nintendo has put us in a room, and they have curated an event where things went wrong during the curation, so we had a little bit of a weird experience.
I still wouldn't give it a 0.
Well, I still wouldn't. Yeah, there were graphics. there was things to play. Look,
Can that be her review?
Oh, there were graphics.
There were graphics.
Okay,
let's go.
Here's something that I feel that people need to understand about this specific process. This is the user end of the review score, right? So this is users basically just looking at the extremes. Is it bad? Is it good?
Yes.
There is no in between generally for users, because users either like something or dislike something,
or they see that a review's being bombed so much that they're like, well, I got to give it a 10 because I got to make up for the negativity of this guy. It's really a 7, but I'm just making up for what that guy over there did.
That's exactly what's going down right now with Pokemon Let's Go. Now, from what we played of it, the game has functional graphics. The graphics are, by their definition, very subjective, but they're clean, they're crisp, they're good-looking, they're well-designed. I wouldn't look at them and go, oh boy, those are gross-looking assets. Like, they look like they were well done. Even if they existed from previous games and they were brought over, that's okay, because they're still good-looking graphics. Now, in terms of gameplay, the argument being had here is that the game isn't as complex as the previous entries of the mainline Pokemon games, which is a very interesting criticism, and one that a lot of gamers out there need to be aware of.
Yes.
However, if you don't like the gameplay, that's one thing, but to say the gameplay is broken is a totally different metric. And what we're talking about with Fallout 76 is broken gameplay.
Yes. Yeah, it's problematic. When you think of the core of a video game, you need something that you can play, and this is something that you can't play seamlessly.
Yes,
right?
This is something that I feel is not just a problem with Fallout 76, but it's a problem with a lot of different games where they have some element of the game that people don't tend to like too much, and they completely destroy it.
Well, okay, here's an example, and I won't name the outlet, but people might be able to guess it anyway. There was a game, Prey, the 2016 or maybe 2017 version of Prey came out. One reviewer had reviewed the game, and he had mostly a positive experience with the game going through, but encountered a save bug that basically ruined the game itself, and then he gave it a negative score. Now, other people didn't have that issue, but he did, and it became like a big problem. So it was less than a 5 out of 10, but because of this one issue, and that number score, I feel, wouldn't have reflected that experience in its entirety, because even the reviewer said that the experience was mostly positive.
That's great. That's a really good point. How about do you remember when Cuphead came out and there was that one reviewer that was struggling to get over the challenging area? Again, not to mention names or anything like that. But that person, if they were to have reviewed that game, whatever they said would have been incredibly weird, because it wouldn't have replicated or referenced what actual gamers out there that have experience would have said about the game.
Right. Well, and maybe what they say would have had some merit, or what they would have said would have had some merit. Oh, it's difficult to do this or to do that. But if they gave a number score to that, and people simply looked at that number score, they'd be like, oh, no, this is crap.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I feel is a huge issue with just having a star rating or a number system, is that a lot of people don't take the time to go into an article and read what's going on. They see, okay, it's a 7, it's an 8, it's a 4, it's a 5. I'll buy it, I won't buy it based on that alone. And that it is by no means a way to approach this.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's something, too. The way we review video games in general, this is kind of a strange thing to talk about, because we typically don't talk about our review process that much. But let's dive into what we actually do. Now, we cover a ton of video games from a whole wide spectrum. Both Adam and I have been playing video games for
our lives.
Yeah, pretty much since we were babies. Yeah, it's insane. We've been playing games for a while, but having played video games for so long, we have seen genres evolve in wildly different ways. I remember playing some of the very first-person shooters ever made, like Wolfenstein 3D, like Nightmare 3D, like Blakestone. I can go older than that, where you actually have other games like maze games and stuff like that.
Some of the Ultima games were in first-person as well, yeah.
Super old school. Way back then, first-person shooters played very differently. And I think I've mentioned this in the past, too, where you look at a game like XCOM, where the original XCOM is a bit more of a difficult game to control compared to the newer entries of the series, which are far easier to control, far easier to understand. But what you have there is a reviewer like us who's understood the building blocks of these games. One of the reasons we like reviewing and talking about retro video games a lot is because we know how to take those games at the time that they'd come out and look at them at that time period and look at them as kind of this time capsule piece, right? We wouldn't take something like Shenmue and review it now by modern standards. We could better describe it to you so that you can understand what the game was like back then, but the game definitely would not. I don't believe there is any game out there that truly lives up 101% to what everyone's hopes and dreams are of a game existing now, right? Because the games have completely changed.
Well, and you know what? That raises another point about scores. A 10 out of 10. What does that mean? We know that there's no perfect piece of medium, right? There's no perfect video game. So a 10 out of 10 again is arbitrary. It's like it's whatever.
The way that the number system works is that they give these strange numbers to things that just really don't have a grounded reality. Imagine if somebody were to review Citizen Kane and they gave
4 out of 10.
A 4 out of 10. And they gave it a
worse
4 out
than
of 10.
Fallout 76.
Sure. They gave it a 4 out of 10 because, this game's in black and white. Or this movie's in black and white. Or what if they reviewed a certain piece of music and said, well, I don't like the way that this sounds, despite the fact that at the time that's how it sounded. The number that was given way back in the day would not reflect what it is now, and it didn't reflect anything at the time. So it's such a strange, arbitrary system. You're absolutely right. It just doesn't have a grounding in reality.
We talked a little bit about how video games have evolved over time. The industry's forever evolving. We're getting to a point now where games are becoming more of a service. Games are getting updates frequently. I mean, we're losing a lot of physical media and stuff. So why can't a review, in a sense, be something that's continuously updated? Some websites are doing that with some experiences, but a review aggregator like Metacritic, they take the first score that you give a game and that's it. That's what it gets. If Destiny gets a new patch or a new expansion and somehow the quality of that game in a reviewer's perspective has been upped, that won't be showcased on a review aggregator. There's so many problems with this.
I'm just going to name some games that existed in the past that no longer represent what they are now. Rainbow Six Siege, Counter-Strike Go, Minecraft, Hearthstone, World of Warcraft. I could keep going, but a really good identifier for a game that even I reviewed back when it came out initially, and I was not happy with it, No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky was a functional game, but I didn't consider it to be a very good one.
Yeah, we even spoke about No Man's Sky with a newer update, and our opinions changed a little bit there, and we're seeing even more footage and even more gameplay from No Man's Sky and some of the newer updates.
And there's still a new update coming out.
Yeah,
too,
and
right?
it looks like it's evolving wonderfully. But if you were to compare, like you're getting to the original piece to what's out there now, it's like it's night and day.
And that's why I don't think the review score has a purpose. Siskel and Ebert were two very popular reviewers that reviewed movies, and one of the systems they utilized to review movies was the 2 thumbs up system. So the 2 thumb system. I don't know. Maybe there's like a better
thumbs up, thumbs down system. That's what I call it.
This was how it worked. If they liked the movie, if they thought it was worth watching, they got it. They gave it a thumbs up.
Do we have to?
Didn't?
It's sad. No,
it's sad.
We do. We have to explain it, but
they give it a thumbs up. If they didn't like it, they'd give it a thumbs down. I know this seems like you shouldn't have to hear this.
There's like 12 or 14-year-old people that maybe didn't grow up with the Siskel and Ebert.
But why aren't more game creators or game reviewers utilizing a very similar system? So I like to basically say a game is good, you should play it, or a game is bad, I think you should avoid it.
We have to jump into this because this is interesting too. Some websites that used to give ratings for video games, they backtracked. Like what we're saying, they're like, no, scores. It's weird. Maybe they think it's archaic or it just doesn't work for the format, for the medium, and they say no. We're going to have maybe a summary or a thumbs up, thumbs down system. Review aggregators still need a number from these websites. So even if it is a website that has like a thorough write-up and a single paragraph at the ending saying, okay, maybe you should pick it up, maybe not, no number. A number's still allotted to the site in a review aggregator because they need that.
Oh yeah, if it's, and this is the thing, if it's a thumbs up, that's 100%. If it's a thumbs down, it's a 0. Right?
Yeah. Well, these websites are. I don't know how they get these numbers, but like whatever. 7s, 6s, 8s.
It's really confusing because as we've been doing the show, we've moved across and figured out ways to review games in very different ways and in very different styles.
We're still learning. We're still changing things because the medium itself is changing. It's always evolving. It's not so simple anymore.
No, it's true,
and it can't just be a number.
When somebody takes a look at what Fallout 76 is right now, they have to compare it with the games in the series that came before it. If it's a standalone game that didn't have a game that preceded before it, you have to compare it against other games in the same genre or in the same universe or concept, and you have to compare it against those abilities. When you compare Fallout 76 against its predecessors, it falls on its face. When you compare it against its contemporaries trying to do a similar kind of game style,
like an MMO, for example, or something like that, some multiplayer online,
it falls on its face. These are the problems with the game because it tries to do so much, but it really doesn't get everything together all at once and make it a good experience as a whole. So it really does falter. A lot of reviewers out there that are doing their number systems are reflecting that, but they're almost seeming by accident to make it seem like it's a passable game when it really isn't. I know that by us saying this, it is very subjective when we say that about Fallout 76. And even myself, when I was writing out some stuff on Twitter, I mentioned that there's people out there that are going to like it because I have seen the craziest games that people will love, even if they're completely bad. Look, folks.
Deadly Premonition, man.
I love it. We've done a series.
It's got bad scores.
We've done a series called Worst Ever, and in the Worst Ever series, we cover some of the worst consoles ever made. These games were stolen from other developers. In many cases, they're hacks or modifications. They're thievery. That's what they are, and they are done at a cheap dime, basically to steal people's money. That's what these game systems are, and that's what the games are. Even when I reviewed some of those systems, I've gotten messages going, "Hey, I got that as a gift for Christmas. That was a good system." It literally doesn't stay on. There's one game that somebody was like, "It's a great game," and I remember the game that the whatever I was playing, it crashed at level 3. Like it couldn't go past level 3, and I guess they just didn't know that, so they were just.
Or maybe they enjoyed that interaction.
I suppose people out there have varied and very different opinions on things, and that's fine. But when consumers out there are led to believe that an experience like Fallout 3 is a passable experience and worth their money, that's not fair.
No.
Because you're basically telling consumers something that is going to harm them. And very recently, there's been a lot of talk about an event that happened at a GameStop where somebody got really angry and like destroyed a lot of stuff. We're not condoning that. That's a whole other thing. We typically don't talk about stuff like that. But that shows what happens when consumers are led to believe something that isn't true about a product. Yeah,
it's problematic on so many fronts. I think, like I said, a really big part of this is a lot of people just go to a website and they want to see a number, right? And they don't do the reading. If websites like the one that you'd mentioned earlier that had like a, what was it, 5 out of 10 for Fallout, if it was simply the write up of the issues that they had, the positives that they had, like and people just paid attention to that, maybe, I don't know if it would still translate to a 50, but it would get the idea out of what the game is, and people would be able to take it from there.
There are even issues when you think about Arkham Knight. I got a refund on Arkham Knight after like a month or two after having purchased it, and the reason I got my refund was the game wasn't working properly. But anyone that went out there and read reviews that happened to read the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One review may have been like, oh, well, the game's fine. But then if they bought it on PC, they would have been met with a game that was functionally broken. And then to this day, I don't believe they've ever re-released it. And I think that there's stuff like that can happen that really kind of taints the water and makes people feel like they don't know what to expect from a game.
Yeah, it sounds like not only do we need to rethink how reviews are done, but maybe consumers themselves really should be just looking into things, reading between the lines, or reading the lines that are literally there.
Yeah.
Not just looking at a number.
I think the solution to this is getting rid of the number system. I think the solution to this is basically telling people, I like this game, or I dislike this game, and if the game has bugs and is at a point that they believe is not playable, they need to be okay with letting the consumer know that, but never hide that behind a score, because a score just does not make any sense. In today's modern gaming environment, scores have no purpose, they've got no function, and I can't imagine a world where people degrade video games to a simple number when they are far more complex and more interesting than that.
Yes, continuously evolving and more complex than they've ever been. Well,
yeah. Folks, what do you think? Are you excited about scores in video games, and do they help you buy games?
Yeah. Do you think this is necessary? Do you think these are things that are just a product of, the simplicity of the past, let's say?
Or would you like to see a different kind of system be implemented where people just do thumbs up and some
sideways?
Down? Yeah, let us know what you think.